I guess we can start here in the front. This is really where it all began, and that was about 10, 12 years ago. I had attended a very small kind of seminar on permaculture that talked about just turning your house into a garden and integrating the landscape with the building and the social ecology with the natural ecology. And so I thought, why not just start at home? And since that time, my wife and I have just kept working on one piece after another. And we started in the front, and that's a very visible part of your property. It's usually a part that's kept very neat and clean, very much according to the standards of suburbia. And so we felt that our efforts in the front would really be visible and would show people right off what we're about. So in permaculture, you don't till the soil, you sheet mulch. And so it looked very much like any other lawn, filled with grass with a couple of dogwoods. And from that, we sheet mulched it on top, putting cardboard and newspaper, lime, and lots of good old composted leaves that had turned black. And we had a big, thick layer of that because we were able to get them from the university. And then into that, we planted our new seedlings and plants and so on and so forth. And within that first year, we just had this cornucopia of vegetables and flowers and herbs and all kinds of things. It was really pretty amazing. And obviously, we haven't looked back. It's been this way all the time. And we've continued to do it. My wife, Debbie, does the gardening here in the front and likes to work with perennials and fragrances and plants that are fairly easy to take care of. We also have a lot of traffic here, and so actually having a garden helps cut down on noise pollution and even some of the air pollution.
I'm Debbie, I'm Charlie's wife, and I have my garden in the front yard. We live on a busy street, and so it gives us a way to kind of block out the traffic, but also neighbors walking by on the sidewalk have something interesting to look into and see. I grow mostly perennial plants here, and a lot of them are shade-loving plants because as the garden's gotten older, it's gotten shadier. So I have some bleeding heart here and columbine, lilies coming up, foxglove. I grow ferns, and there's a herb garden over here where I can come out from the kitchen and pick herbs I want, chives and mint and oregano, parsley, cilantro, and I also have some dwarf fruit trees, which Charlie got me into growing in here, and they provide a lot of variety, and they're only a couple years old, but you can see the apples growing on this tree right here. And there's another dwarf apple over there. This is kind of unusual. These are onions that I'm growing in the front yard. And there used to be a rose bush there, and they were a great companion plant actually for the rose bush to keep pests off of it. But the rose bush died. I started gardening about 20 years ago. I lived in another house and started digging up the front yard one day and just had a very small front yard garden, and people walked by and thought I was crazy and wondered why I was digging up the lawn. And then when I moved here, I wanted to do that again, and Charlie had actually already started something like that by taking up his grass. He wanted to plant in the front too, and I just kind of took over the front yard. Springtime, of course, is the greatest time of year because all my old friends, my perennial plants, start blooming, and you kind of forget during the winter what's going to grow. And it's great to see them all come up through the earth and bloom again. And there I see, there's my old friend, the hellebora, and there are the ferns that are, uncurling and coming up. And I just love to see that in the garden. And it really centers me when I work here. So I really love it.
You solve a few problems as you go along. And one of the problems, I'll show you over here, was what to do with the area that goes along the street. And usually this is just grass. Well, the first year we grew corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters. These are plants that work together very well. Corn grows high, the beans grow up the corn, the beans put nitrogen back into the soil, the squash runs out on top of the soil, acting as a kind of a living mulch and feed off of last year's nitrogen put in there by the beans. The problem was it took a lot of water, and we had to cart our water out with buckets to keep this going. So we decided just to make an area that would live according to the available water that's here in Greensboro. It's a technique that's called xeriscaping. That is, just plants, mainly native plants, have to make it on their own. And now you can see we've given it various grasses, elderberry. Here's a very interesting plant called the horsetail, a very primitive plant that breaks into little sections, can be used actually for scrubbing pots. It's very interesting. Little plum bush, all of it just makes it on its own. So it's a very low and maintenance free. And as I take you kind of throughout the gardens in the house, just keep in mind that in permaculture you try to plant a lot of perennials. That means you have very stable, year repeating kinds of plants. A lot of them are fruit-bearing plants or herbs, and it means that there's very low maintenance. So this whole lot of 50 feet by 100 feet that's filled with a garden, in the summertime when it's all hot and you don't want to be outside, takes us only a couple hours a week maintenance at the most. Some weeks we don't do anything at all. So maybe it averages out to about an hour a week, which is no more than people spend, let's say, mowing their lawn and working. So we feel we're very lucky to get all that we have at very low maintenance. So let me take you along the south side of the house. Anyone who's interested in sustainable living, sustainable design, permaculture, always works with the sun. And you really try to coordinate your life with the sun. You coordinate your buildings with the sun. In fact, if you want to kind of extrapolate, you really talk about a sun culture, a sun civilization, a sun economy, if you will, because it's a tremendous energy source. Economically, the sun can create an awful lot more jobs than oil can in the long run. And the sun will be around a lot longer than that oil will be around. So you really start thinking about the sun. Now, on a dwelling like this, it's the south side or the sun side of the house that presents a lot of possibilities because you have all that good sun and that energy coming in. This would be the side of the house, let's say, if we were going to obtain a lot of free heat in the wintertime, that we would draw it in through the south side. In our particular situation, it's hard to do that because it's very narrow between the two buildings and we share a driveway. So I can't build an envelope structure on my south side in which to trap heat and send it through the house. But that would be very easy to do technologically to a new house or even to rig up to an old house. What we did decide to do was to work with biological solutions, in this case certain plants, to shade the south side and at the same time gives us lots of fruit. So let me talk about that and kind of explain how that works. We have a two-story home here and it goes up fairly high, a lot of space that can be heated by the sun. So, and we're working actually with a very narrow garden bed, just 4 feet wide. So what are we going to do? Well, we have to choose things that grow vertically. And we think of two things. One, pears as a species of trees grows vertically. And you can see these nice semi-dwarf pear trees which grow anywhere from 12 to maybe 18, hopefully not any larger. They grow up and along the side of the house and basically now are covering a good deal of the house. And the plants, the branches move up vertically so they don't hang down to the driveway and blocking the cars. The roots are not a terrible problem because the roots, like the branches, go down deeply and vertically. So it's not, as far as I'm thinking, really hurting the foundation of the house. We have 3 pear trees. They pollinate each other. They're very disease resistant. You don't have to spray them. Here in the middle, we have a fig tree, which goes up against the brick chimney, brick and concrete chimney, which acts as a heat sink. So it's a little warmer here, and the fig actually loves it, because you can see here it is mid-May, and we already have some really delicious figs coming around, and this is only the spring crop. We'll get a much larger autumn crop. So we have pears, figs, and if we were to look down here, we see a bamboo trellis made out of bamboo that's gathered within a couple of blocks from here. That's built up along the side of the house, and on it we have grapes. We also grow on there other vines, because it's good, if shade is important to you, it's good to have several vining plants growing up in the same space. In nature, that's a principle that nature does. It's the principle of redundancy. If anything's important, you don't just do it one way, you do it 5 ways, so that if one dies off, you have 4 other solutions. So we have grapes as our main solution, but we also have coming up now some beans, some purple hyacinth beans, and some passion fruit, which will fill in the niches. And by July, when it gets hot, that will be a wall of greenery, which in combination with all the pears is really enough to cool down this very hot side of the house. And so we've tried to do it living as much as possible without air conditioners, and just using old-time combinations of attic fan, closing your windows, and then these kind of biological controls that help a great deal. And the great thing is we can eat it, so we have lots of fruit as well. In an urban situation, you try to kind of pack in as much as you can. I remember when I started this project, and after a few years, I thought I'd done everything. And then a friend reminded me that one of the basic principles in permaculture was just to sit down and observe and keep looking. And when I did that, I realized there were all these other niches all around, and things that I could do, and I could put in things here and move things over there. And taking that as a rule of thumb, I found that there's just kind of an endless kind of interaction with the natural ecology, that constantly new things can happen. So this little corner has a lot going on, and it's just an example of how it's actually in an urban situation kind of forces you to think small, and that's been plenty a challenge for me. So for instance, this is a wonderful apple espalier. This is a technique that's been used in Europe and China and other countries for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. To be on the safe side, I'll say hundreds of years, in which you take apple trees, and if you look carefully, you can see that there are just a small tree here with 2 branches coming out in the shape of a V at 45 degrees. So that there are 10 trees in just a very short distance, spaced 1.5 feet apart. And each of those trees going out, radiating out at 45 degrees, so it forms a kind of cross-hatched 2-dimensional fence. Now on this, of these 10 trees, there are 6 varieties of apples, so they cross-pollinate. They are surrounded as much as possible by insecticidal plants to help with that energy, and they are hooked in to this water barrel and a soaker hose, so that that soaker hose, which releases water, is wound around the trunks of these trees, and the watering is taken care of. So it's basically a kind of self-sufficient system. I just have to come back every autumn and kind of groom the tree, making sure it just doesn't grow all over the place. But you can see we're going to have some fine apples this year at relatively great quantities for a small space. You're going to get a lot more growing in this space than than just a single tree. Also, it functions also as a fence, it's a boundary, it's an edge. It cut off a walkway so that this bedroom in this corner would have a kind of a quiet corner to it. So it's actually used as a kind of a way to create outdoor rooms as well. Right next to it is a beautiful dwarf plum tree. In urban situations, you really want to work with dwarf fruit, not standard fruit trees. A standard plum tree would go 25 feet high and kind of take over the yard. We grow 20 types of fruit here. And even some of those types of fruit, like the apple, we might have 10 varieties of apple here, 3 or 4 varieties of pear, 3 or 4 varieties of plums. So multiply that out, and you've got something growing for organic fruit from your early strawberries through your plums and blackberries and raspberries and on into the fall fruits, of which we have a lot, like apple, kiwi, oriental persimmon, Asian pear, fig has 2 seasons. So we're eating fruit all 8 months of the year. It's organic fruit, and that makes a lot of kind of economic sense too, because it's so expensive. But this is just a beautiful tree. Plus, we get these wonderful plums. And you can see it's just laden with lovely plums, which will ripen in June. And it's a dwarf tree, so it's fully grown now. And with the red leaves, it makes just a wonderful landscape feature. Some people like to think of kind of what we're doing here as edible landscaping, which is a nice kind of name. It makes sense to a lot of people, where rather than just decorative plants, you put in plants that are functional, are edible for human food or animal or bird food, or are in some way useful, like a useful herb or an insecticidal plant. An insecticidal plant being a plant that brings into your garden helpful insects that will combat the insects you don't want around. We could continue down this kind of wonderful south side of the house with an oriental persimmon. Oriental persimmons are like orange baseballs. They are non-astringent, so you can eat them when they're crunchy and they taste like an apple. You can eat them after frost when they taste like a very sweet American persimmon. And it actually provides a source of fruit from, let's say, late September all the way through December, and it's really quite beautiful. And another plum tree, an acock plum. So we have on the south side just an immense amount of fruit and enjoyment. And if I can just direct you down here to the driveway, we just bring in chips for the driveway, and these chips decompose so that about every other year we can kind of shovel out our driveway and put the driveway into the garden and then bring in new chips. So we have, in permaculture, you're composting in many, many places, the least of which is the compost bins. But all our paths we can dig out, in this case our driveway, so we have lots of new, good organic materials coming along. Having water in the garden is just such an important feature, and often in urban and suburban situations we think of water as something that flows out of pipes. We want to get rid of rain as quickly as we can and send it down the gutters and down the pipes and far away. In permaculture, we feel, well, water's a resource, water's good. We want to slow it down, we want to store it and use it. So we want to capture it in barrels, tanks, ponds. We want it to be absorbed by a very spongy soil. We want to configure our landscape in terraces and swales so it'll capture it that way, and to just hold on to the water. So Debbie and I have the goal of capturing all our rainwater, of at least slowing it down so that it goes into a barrel, drops into our land, and doesn't just instantly, the very day of the rain, leave our property. So we have a bunch of ponds around. We have lots of water barrels capturing the rain water. And here we have this beautiful pond. We draw a lot of our water for watering plants and vegetables with cans that we dip into the pond and carry elsewhere. You can grow things in a pond. You can grow food. You can grow fish. Especially the tilapia fish is kind of has been chosen as the premier small container fish. You can grow tilapia in a 50-gallon barrel and feed it vegetable mash. And it has low oxygen requirements, so it's just great. We have a pond here for the use of the water, and it's simply so beautiful to have this in our midst. There's a lot of wildlife. It's a full ecology. Our ponds, in keeping with sustainable design, do not use pumps and filters. They do not use mechanical devices. Nature obviously does not need pumps and filters of a mechanical variety. It has its own. For instance, this is a plant. Looks like a little fern. And it actually is a type of fern. These are all common plants that can be bought at an aquarium store. And what they do is oxygenate the water. They actually function like like running water would oxygenate. But they're all filled in all around, putting oxygen into the water, making it available for fish. The fish eat the mosquito larvae. So really, if you were to study this water and look for any mosquito larvae, you wouldn't find it because the fish find it first. It's kind of their food of choice. It's a big fat piece of protein, which they would rather have than just, let's say, sucking on the algae or something like that, which they will eat the algae too, which is a really neat thing. What eventually happens is that the pond cleans itself, it oxygenates itself, it takes care of itself. It draws into itself frogs, little snakes, fish, snails, dragonflies, little water bugs, water beetles, all the things that happen in a natural ecology, so that you have this thing that basically takes care of itself. All you have to do is make sure it has enough water. And that we do partly through this nice bamboo here, and that this bamboo is attached to a water barrel which feeds it. So when it rains, water just comes pouring out at the end of that bamboo and fills the pond in relatively short time. Also, the amazing thing is that this pond is basically just constructed out of carpet and thin black plastic. Rather than costing me $1,500 to make, it cost me $15 to make. That is, you grab the carpet from the side of the street. We collected stones, and all we had to do was buy this thin black plastic, which you can buy from Lowe's, and you create a layered effect. Lay out carpet first, then your black plastic, and then another layer of carpet. So the two layers of carpet protect the thin black plastic, create an impermeable membrane, you fill it up with water, you inoculate it with some soil and some plants. A couple of weeks later, you introduce your fish. It goes through a couple of algae blooms and finds a balance, and within a couple of months, you have a kind of self-sufficient water ecology. This has the added benefit with the carpet of actually acting as a sponge, so it wicks up the water and puts it underneath and keeps everything moist underneath, so that you can literally have a garden and plant things in between the stones all around the garden. You could have a huge strawberry field, herb garden that would water itself just by drawing up the water through the carpet from the pond. So it's another example of a kind of complex, and yet because of that complexity, a self-sufficient ecosystem. It's just a very fun place to be, and all the wonderful fish that come along. If you do a pond like this, don't buy koi, just buy little feeder fish, 4 or 6 for $1, put them in the pond and they will take care of it, and they will take care of themselves. So this is another example, very low maintenance and lots of benefits from it. Well, now we're in the back of the yard. Now remember, this is just a very small lot, 50 by 150. Because we're doing different things in different areas, it gives you the feeling that it's a lot larger place. If you're landscaping, sometimes we call it creating rooms, and that are divided by these edges or paths and so on. And so now we're in the back, and there are several rooms in the back that have are doing fairly distinct things. First of all, you can see how, while this is growing a lot of food, it's also just a beautiful place to be. You can just stand back, you can take it in, you can relax. I like to think that it has the look and feel of a kind of a more natural landscape. It's a bit chaotic. The aesthetic is a kind of natural aesthetic. It's not all everything in neat rows and cleanly laid out. And that indeed is what permaculture tries to do. It tries to mimic natural systems. And in that, bring in the diversity, bring in all those good, helpful plants, and then you create a situation where it's easy to have an organic garden. So what do we have here? Well, one little thing that we love to have is areas for people. So in this little corner, at the end of a pathway that winds through the backyard, is what we call our secret garden. And to show you how kind of secret it is, I can tiptoe over to the bench and sit down at the bench and be basically invisible from the camera and invisible from the back of the house, and yet I have full view of the garden. And we surround that with some lovely plants. This rose has largely spent itself, but it's a deliciously smelling Sarah Lawrence rose, a just wonderfully fragrant pink rose that was in profusion a couple of weeks ago and still has a few blooms. And we put in other kinds of plants that will be smell good and look good, just to be a very pleasant place to sit. And this kind of mixing in the social ecology with the natural ecology is also a very important part of any kind of ecological design, because you have to design it for people to enjoy. In the back here is actually a good view of a permaculture orchard. Now, this is not your typical looking orchard, because it's just a profusion of plants. I am now surrounded by 10 or 12 kinds of different fruit that are growing in this area. And in permaculture, we also think in vertical layers, and we try to fill a three-dimensional space. So we start out with some taller trees. In this case, they're not too tall because they're dwarf fruit trees. And let me just tell you what some of the fruit is growing here. We have peach here, apricot here with nice big apricots at this point, an apple, a nectarine, another apple, behind that an Asian pear, and that constitutes our upper layer of trees. Now if we come down a layer, we come to the bush level. And in the bush level, we have a sour cherry bush. Each of these 2 bushes will be enough cherries for a good cherry pie. Purple plum bush. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 blueberry bushes. Gooseberry, currant. You get the picture. We have on that level, lots of different things. Then the next level down is the herbaceous layer, where we have some good insecticidal plants: mint, fennel, lavender, comfrey. All of these are very helpful plants. Then we even have some vining plants, and the best example of that are these wonderful hardy kiwis. And they're very small, and they will grow to the size of large green grapes, not brown fuzzy balls like we're used to. Those are the tropical kiwis. But these will grow to large green grapes, same structure, same sweetness, and just luscious, and form a very nice kind of running arbor over this walkway. The idea is that when you group these all together, the very diversity gives the natural system stability. And so this is a place where all this fruit is growing, and basically my task is, coming in and snipping off things that are growing too quickly and kind of keeping things away from one another. We even have here another small little miniature apple tree of back here next to some foxgloves, a really kind of pretty arrangement. We do have an area of the garden that is devoted just to annual vegetables. Annual vegetables, of course, are just tropical plants that are transplanted in the summer in a temperate zone. So we put this in an area that is open to the sun. It's small in our yard, but sufficient. Any urban person has to kind of have a food strategy, and we grow some of our own food. We go to farmers market or local markets for most of the rest of our food, so we have to rely very little on a large supermarket. What we grow here are some of our favorite vegetables: tomatoes, beans, peppers, eggplant. We have some garlic and leeks. We're growing some blue potatoes this year. And all of those things, because of the coldness, they're fairly small now, the tomatoes, the beans, and so on, but they will keep coming. So we have an area here devoted to the annual vegetables as well. This is a daylily, a very common plant, but few people know that in fact it is an edible plant. You can take these and stir fry them, all of these stems, cut them up. So we have quite a few stir fries here. And of course the flower, the orange flower when it comes, is an edible, sweet, and filled with vitamins kind of flower. In the foreground here is, looks like Queen Anne's lace. It has that nice umbrella shape of the umbelliferous family. The umbellifers are among the best of the insecticidal plants because they're very sweet and they invite a lot of insects that are very important in the kind of insect management of a garden. In this case, these are carrots, which are part of that same family. And what we've done is we've simply allowed carrots to stay in the ground, go to seed, and on the way to going to seed, they have these beautiful flowers. So that is, we get our good insecticidal plants off to an early start. We don't have to wait around for the Queen Anne's lace in the hot weather. We can get our seeding carrots, and this is actually part of the organic controls of a garden or a farm. And if we were keeping bees, they would be a wonderful sweet source for the bee colony. So just little kinds of things like this, letting your carrots grow, it actually is a beautiful flower to me. That's one of the dimensions of an organic garden. Well, I guess any organic gardener has to have their compost pit, and it's usually put in a place like around the corner. In this case, this is our spot here, 2 bins. All the newer stuff is put into here, and some of the stuff that has had a chance to work is over here. And just to show you, I will just put my hand, and I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but these are the creatures that do the work. Permaculture is kind of based around the worm. Worms till the soil. Worms fertilize the soil. Every day they cast off 1.5 times their body weight, and they are actually a fertilizer factory. They enhance every important nutrient that they take in. They actually will create more phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, all magnesium, all of those things, put it back into the soil, aerate the soil. So basically in permaculture, we think of ourselves as we just feed the worms, and they are the ones who are in control of the soil. They figure out, because they love to live in really beautiful soil. In a compost pile, you just see them, a lot of them, like you're seeing here. In our soil, in a permaculture garden, we follow, though, the same principle. We try to recreate the conditions that worms will thrive in. And basically, even over the winter time in a permaculture garden, you cover the whole garden with pine needles or straw with a big thick layer like a quilt. And underneath that, you've laid some autumn worm food for them to eat through the winter, and they will simply work and till the soil all through the winter time, just the way they're working a compost pile. If you'll notice, I work at UNCG, so there's lots of shredded paper, and worms absolutely love shredded paper. So this is a great addition to any compost pile. Plus, if you want to, in your home, this is a very clean kind of worm food. You can actually create a, inside the house, worm bin, and let's say a plastic bin that you kind of, keep in a closet or something like that with a top to it. Moisten it like this is, a kind of a moist soil, plop that in, take some worms or rich soil that has some worms, and you've got your worm bin inside the house. For me, I just like to kind of keep this as part of my compost. And by next, let's see, it's the spring, probably by the autumn, I will have some rich compost that I can lay out into the garden. It takes about half a year for my compost to kind of, for things to break down and form compost. Permaculture has this idea that people live in a set of kind of zones, starting with the home and going out, and in each zone you have a range of activity. The closer to the house, that area you're most active in, and as you move out and away from your house, you're less active. So cluster around yourself the kinds of things that you might want to do every day. So we have an herb spiral very close to the back door that has some tarragon and some, well, this is some old cilantro. We have some parsley coming up, some thyme, some basil coming up on the other side. And it's in an herb, it's in a spiral shape. And in the middle of that spiral, it's watered by a unglazed clay pot. So you simply, that like a shaft that fits down into the ground. So you simply put your water into that unglazed clay pot, and it waters most of that spiral. So we have our herbs close at hand, and we also have a lettuce bed here close at hand that we can go to and every day or in the winter time, which makes it real easy. Close to the house is also where kind of people like to sit and hang out and stuff. So we've tried to work things together with, we created a stone patio with grapes vine growing up on top. And we've even put in lights so we can light this whole area up. And in fact, the lights run all through the property all the way around the back. And so you can, in the dark, you can light it up and it's really beautiful. We have a painting of Pan, the god Pan, the god of the garden in the back. And it's just a very pleasant, livable space. Used to be very hot and dry, and now it's very livable. Also in the back, we have another pond, which we have, which is just covered with herbs. This is lots of thyme, that we can use for cooking. This is an herb that's an insecticidal plant, pennyroyal, member of the mint family, which actually a lot of bugs, especially mosquitoes, do not like the smell of mint, and so this actually repels mosquitoes, and you can actually take it on you and rub you. When you buy an herbal flea collar for a cat or dog, and you look at the ingredients, it'll say pennyroyal. It's a very strong smell, and we humans can just pick it up and rub it and to repel insects, and it's a lot safer for you than all the chemicals that you use in others. This pond also has another interesting feature in that it gathers the water from the rain gutters attached to the house. So it simply travels down and then drops out of here, fills that up, looks pretty, it's practical, keeps this filled up. It's easy to think of growing a lot of your herbs right at your back door, growing some lettuce for your salads. We grow lettuce over the wintertime just by creating a very simple plastic envelope over the garden bed that sometimes we even do with bamboo stays, so it doesn't really cost much, and that will let us have lettuce and greens all through the wintertime. My wife and I decided to live in the city and not move out to the country. We actually had the choice of getting some really nice country land, and we just decided to stick around. And we were within biking distance of where we work, and we could live here pretty simply and modestly. We'd gotten the house fairly cheaply, and we were able to pay it off, and so expenses were low, and we could feel we were more in control of our finances. Growing a lot of our own food, living in a place that is kind of pesticide-free and pollution-free means a lot to us. We often think of ourselves as living in the midst of a garden. I mean, people kind of joke with us about, being the Garden of Eden and coming back and calling us Adam and Eve. And I know it's a joke because, I mean, we're fully modern people, and yet we really feel that our working with nature has given so much to us of kind of guiding us about how to live in a city environment, how to live as two professional people, what's important in life. We've raised our kids within this context. They kind of take that with them wherever they go. We have a lot of people coming through since we do workshops, seminars. In a couple of days, a little group of kids from Peeler School are coming, and so people learn about this and they like what they see. And we continue to learn too. So it's a very, I think, practical solution that people can do just in their own backyard. A lot of people ask me just, well, how do you get going in something like this? One, there are some good books, and there are plenty of websites on permaculture. You can just look up the word. There are several good books now. Introduction to Permaculture, Gaia's Garden, that act as a kind of text that will give you lots of ideas. I certainly say to start small. Start at a small plot, and I often tell people if they're new to the land to kind of sit there for a year and observe it and take it in before you do anything drastic, before you move too many things and so on, so that you know the land, you know how the sun works, you know where the wet spots are and some of its possibilities. In permaculture, we have an idea that's called a forest garden, and you've seen instances of that in and around, where you have a kind of a fruit tree or a couple of fruit trees surrounded by some fruit bushes with some various herbs and so on the closer to the ground. And that very simple idea of a taller tree with some bushes with insecticidal plants can often work. And many of the books that are out there can mention this kind of thing. So if you start small in a little corner of your house, if you start looking in catalogs under organic fruit tree suppliers, you get a lot of good things come through the mail and through catalogs. A really excellent source is through eatit.com, or a company called Edible Landscaping up in Virginia that will mail order you these wonderful trees that are hardy and will last a long time. And that's where I've gotten a lot of my starts from. So you can plant a few trees, a few bushes. You can read up, you can see what's happening in your areas. People like myself offer workshops sometime in how to learn this kind of different way of gardening and working. And from there it kind of builds up. Some people want to go into fruit, some people want to go into solar energy, some people get just, like to build ponds and work with the water aspect of it. And of course everyone's land is different, so you're going to come up with a different design. The idea here is not to work hard, it's to work with nature. And you will find that with worms doing the tilling, you won't need to buy a rototiller. One young man who took my workshop, he says, "I am so glad you saved me $600. Now I don't have to go out and buy that rototiller." And it's really quite true. We don't use any tools like that in a permaculture landscape. The soil is not turned over as part of the planting process. We let the worms and the microorganisms stay in place and take care of the soil. We just feed the soil and kind of work with it and draw from its bounty. Well, the idea of sustainability it's a really big idea with a lot of different meanings. Someone who I respect told me it was something like a three-legged stool. It's got to have a ecological integrity to it, and it has to have an economic feasibility, practicality to it, and it has to have a strong set of kind of diversity to it. And if those three legs of the stool are in place, it really holds up well. I've spoken some about just the ecological stability has very much to do with making sure that the natural systems that surround you can regenerate themselves. All natural systems have that just miraculous ability to regenerate themselves, and that's really what characterizes natural systems versus mechanical systems. So when human beings come along and start messing with those systems, they begin to lose their regenerative ability. So in good design, in good practice, we make sure that the nature around us, the ecology around us, can regenerate itself. Now, that leads to another set of the stool of the kind of the economic viability of it. We have to have a kind of a system that gets people working, gets things produced, puts food on the table, gets energy into our homes, runs machines, cleans things up, makes things like fabrics and so on and so forth. And in fact, all of those have been this kind of stupendous achievement of the industrial era. When people begin to study ecological issues and sustainable design and what's possible, what they soon begin to realize is that this new paradigm, this new model, can achieve those at equal or greater quality for a much smaller price to the earth. And so when people start thinking that way, like the city of Chattanooga started thinking that way, they started bringing in green industries, and they found that bringing in green industries solved pollution problems and also provided all kinds of jobs that they had never dreamed of. And as they began to work through building by building, neighborhood by neighborhood, in creating a green city, they discovered that all kinds of new jobs were kind of being born and coming into being, and people were busy working and thinking about these things. It's been shown by some economists in the kind of new field on ecoeconomics, that a solar economy will actually generate more jobs and distribute wealth better than an industrial economy. And that has yet to be seen, of course, and I kind of personally believe that to be true, but I think that's a very important part. And the last part of that kind of three-legged stool is thinking about the diversity. Diversity in most systems leads to stability of that system. The more options you have, the more possibilities, the greater the differences among the members of that system, the more stable that system is through time. We see this constantly throughout biological systems, and what we have to be willing to do is to extend that into our social and cultural systems. So in a sustainable society, we really have to think of keynoting diversity, bringing in diversity where it's not there. Just like in a bankrupt ecosystem, we will build up the diversity rather than deplete it. And in a society, we need to be thinking of drawing from all kinds of cultural wisdom, cultural ideals, practices, species of plants, how former cultures have worked with solar energy, how you handle your waste. We need to embrace the natural world, because in the natural world are, for instance, many of the solutions for dealing with pollution. It's going to be very hard to deal with pollution that is an industrial problem through industrial means, solving harsh chemicals with other harsh chemicals. We find that, in fact, by going to biological answers and building up the diversity, that we can detoxify poisonous landscapes. And so this is just part of the friendship and diversity that we want to build up with other species, and really, by extension, other peoples and other cultures. So that three-legged stool of the economic viability and the ecological integrity and that socio-cultural biological diversity is, I think, what really, makes up sustainability.